I'm really thrilled to be here because the book sort of did begin right here, and we did have dinner, and I sent Bill and Thane about 438 emails in the course of writing it, desperately seeking legal advice. And I could not have done it without them. In fact, I'm going to read the acknowledgments. This is the first time at a reading I have read the acknowledgments. Blah, 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 blah. Professors Thane Rosenbaum and Ben Zipursky of Fordham Law School and a large debt of thanks to Dean William Traynor of the Fordham Law School, constitutional scholar and gentleman par excellence. And, I've been on tour with this book, and book tours are sort of a peculiar form of torture. The other day I did what's called a satellite TV tour, and you do 15 back-to-back live interviews with TV shows across the country, and they lock you in a room with a robotic camera. So you feel like a virus or something that they're studying. And you have an earpiece, and the technician says, okay, the next one is Mike in Minneapolis. So on came this voice, Mr. Buckley. And I said, oh, hi. I said, so did you get rid of all those Republicans up there? And there was this sort of pause. And he said, well, we've still got a few left. I said, well, how's my friend Al Franken doing? Pause. I said, well, I don't know, actually. Well, it wasn't Mike in Minneapolis. It was Kevin in Tulsa. So these are, the pitfalls of a book tour. You get a little punchy sometimes in the middle of these things. You know those about the author paragraphs and the back flap of books. Well, after 7 or 8 books, I got sort of bored with them, and I just started making them up. And this was a book called Little Green Man, and I wrote that among my accomplishments were that I said he has been an advisor to every president since William Howard Taft. Now there's sort of a food chain out there, and at the top you have NPR, where they've actually read the book, or they've at least skimmed it, and then down at the bottom you have AM drive time talk radio. And so I was walking into the studio in Boston of the AM drive time radio, and I saw the host, to use a somewhat fancy term for him, was sort of speed reading the about the author paragraph, sort of with beetled brow. And I knew right away that this would be all he would know about me or the book. And he looked up as I walked in and said, you were an advisor to William Howard Taft? And I said, yeah. He said, so we could talk about that? I said, sure. So we did. And I don't think I'll be invited back. But it was worth it. It was worth it. This is my 13th book. And I write, I live in Washington. Sandra Day O'Connor and I arrived in Washington about the same time. Shame. Tell a quick story about going. I went to work in Washington in 1981, and Hinckley had just shot Reagan. John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln to avenge the South, and Hinckley shot Reagan to impress Jodie Foster. And there, in a way, you have the trajectory of idealism in the American political assassin. But if you were a member of the traveling staff, I was George H.W. Bush's speechwriter. These days I take care to insert the H.W. But if you remember the traveling staff, you got a briefing from the Secret Service on what to look for to help them, be their eyes and ears in a suspicious-looking crowd like this. And this briefing took the form of sitting in a darkened basement room in the old executive office building, that building that looks like a Victorian wedding cake next to the White House, watching home assassination movies. Sort of America's least funny home videos. And then we had the Zapruder film with the Kennedy assassination, backward and forward with expert commentary, saying, now watch this next frame. And I'm going, oh no. We had Arthur Bremer shooting George Wallace, and there's a bowl there. And there was this arresting film of an attempt on President Park of South Korea. And President Park is at the podium like this, and giving a speech, 5,000 Koreans in the audience. And Mrs. Park, sitting here, in a chair, looking up adoringly, as politicians' wives have to do, sort of as if this is the most fascinating speech she's ever heard. This is Shakespearean. It was probably, announcing the 5-year plan to dump Hyundais on the American auto market. And, Secret Service all over, the guys with the dark glasses and Uzis looking menacingly at the audience. And so President Park is up there giving a speech, and a guy just saunters down the aisle, just calm as can be, gets to about there, and reaches in, pulls out a .357 Magnum, and sort of takes his time getting comfortable, gets down, sort of checking, and starts blanging away at the podium. And President Park just goes like this, as if this happens all the time. This is, you can almost hear him saying, God, I hate this part. This speech is totally bombing. And now the Secret Service senses that something is wrong. So and one of them does something that I thought was sort of interesting from a career point of view. He runs over and takes cover behind Mrs. Park. And he's trading shots with the guy. He's using the First Lady as a shield. And her head just goes like this, And I was just a, pot-smoking English major who had gone down to, and don't do that because it's bad. Got very bad. And who had just gone down to Washington to do a speechwriting gig. But I was having a sort of, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, Toto moment. And the Secret Service agent giving us the briefing said, we don't do it this way. I said, well, that's good, that's good. And he said, well, now if anything goes down, I hate that phrase, it's going down, it's going down. You basically have two choices. I said, yeah. He said, well, you can duck or take the round. I said, what was the second part? Anyway, that was my arrival in Washington. So I write these books about Washington institutions. I've written about the White House, the State Department, the CIA, FBI, NASA. I'm running out of institutions. It's going to be this Interior Department next. And so someone suggested, why don't you do the Supreme Court? I thought, oh, great idea, great idea. This is, as institutions go, a Himalaya. But not inherently a laugh riot. Right? Every now and then it does something funny, like decide a presidential election. That's funny. But, essentially it's Harry Truman used to have a sign on his desk, the buck stops here, Remember that? Some of you are old enough to remember that. Now the buck just sort of pauses there and on its way up to the Supreme Court. I've always thought, that would make a very good motto for the Supreme Court, engraved in marble above the portico, the buck stops here. As it happens, the actual words inscribed above the portico of the Supreme Court is equal justice under law, which is, okay, it's a good sentiment. As a distinguished alumni of Fordham, as we in the legal fraternity say, I concur. But I still think the buck stops here would be better. I've always wanted to redo the slogan, the mottos on official Washington buildings. For instance, because some of them are old and a little dull, frankly. The National Archives building, for instance. Anyone know what's inscribed above the door? The past is prologue. Shakespeare. But you knew that. Okay, but we could do better. Like, you could Google it. Right? A little more current, I think. The Justice Department. $10 to anyone here who can tell me what's engraved over the door of the Justice Department. This is a very safe offer because, justice is founded in the rights bestowed by nature upon man. Okay, but, dull. Dull. I would suggest instead just one word. Freeze. Or step away from the vehicle. The Pentagon. Now here's a building that cries out for an inscription, a real kick-ass inscription. There's nothing in the Pentagon. I would propose, make my day. Or since 2003, nation building. Anyway, the Supreme Court. So I thought, okay, let's do the Supreme Court. You've all, gosh knows, been inside the Supreme Court. It's my heavens, is there a more awe-inspiring building? Well, apart from the Fordham campus. But you feel this cloistral hush. And it's a place where you feel you do not pick your nose because Zeus is probably watching. He'll send a thunderbolt. It's like the only working. It's like a working Greek temple, and there aren't many of those left. Thank God. When that building was built in 1934, I think it was 34. One of the justices, said, now. We're all going to look like 9 black beetles in the Temple of Karnak. And whenever I see with all respect to the judges here, whenever I see the group picture on the first Monday of October, I think there are the 9 black beetles in the Temple of Karnak. So I thought, okay, well, let's have a go at the Supreme Court. Now, most novels about the Supreme Court these days begin with the Chief Justice being assassinated by the pharmaceutical industry because the corrupt clerk has told them that he's not going to renew the patent on the restless leg syndrome drug. And so the heroine is a good clerk, rather dishing, and she falls in with a very buff investigator named Brad, who works for the shadowy U.S. government agency that monitors the purity of the restless leg syndrome drugs. And it ends with a spectacular car chase through the reflecting pool and an even more spectacular shootout at the FDR Memorial with bullets zinging off the statue of Eleanor Roosevelt. And Fala, the dog. I don't write those kind of books. I should, because then I would be in a position to endow a chair. But if I do start writing those books, beloved Dean, let me assure you, that will be my first gesture. I write, you remember speaking of William Howard Taft, whom I knew intimately, when he left the presidency, was offered a chair of law at Yale Law School, and he replied that he could not accept a chair, but he would accept a sofa of law. Now, I could endow a sofa of law, or a vibrating chair of law. So I do satire, and satire is, writing satire in modern day America is really a losing proposition, because you're in a competition with tomorrow's USA Today. I would be hard-pressed to come up with a hypothetical American situation that could improve on the reality. You may know the story of the teenage boy who has to write a paper for school on the difference between hypothetical and reality. One night he goes into his father's study and asks him if he would give him a hand with this. And the father thinks about it and says, well, go ask your mom if she would sleep with a total stranger for $1 million. So he goes off and he comes back pretty quickly, and the answer is, you bet. And so he says, well, now go ask your sister. And he goes off and comes back lickety-split and reports the answer is totally. So he says, well, there you go. Hypothetically, we're sitting on $2 million. In reality, we're living with a couple of hookers. Supreme Court. Supreme Court. I got to work, and I was on the Acela train. This is the train between Washington and New York. I live on the Acela train in the quiet car, where you're not supposed to use cell phones or talk. And I've become the self-appointed Nazi of the quiet car. I go around shushing people. Life used to be more exciting. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. Now I've become a librarian. So I was sitting there with my legal pad, because if you're writing a novel about the Supreme Court, right, you've got to have I bet John Grisham uses a legal pad, wouldn't you think? And I'm trying to figure out a way in, and I found myself writing down the words Judge Judy. And that made me smile. I had not seen Judge Judy, but I was generally aware of the idea. And so I went out on a limb, and but I had to figure, well, how do you get Judge Judy, onto the Supreme Court? You see, it's not easy being a novelist. You set goals for yourself, and then you have to meet them. Get to-do list, get Judge Judy onto Supreme Court. So I went out on a limb, and novelistically, and I made the president in a Washington novel a good guy. This is generally not done. He's usually a stinker who's cheating on his wife, and he's taking dirty money from Tashkent, or he's money from the restless leg syndrome people. But so I made it. He's a good guy. He's just trying to do a good job. He doesn't even want a second term. He's just an honest guy. He's from Ohio. I made him from Ohio because is anyone here from Ohio? Well, it's a scientific fact that everyone from Ohio is nice. It's true, isn't it? I even made him come from the same hometown as Neil Armstrong. You know the name of this town? Yes, Wapakoneta. Did anyone else here know that? See, no. So his name is Donald, because it's a scientific fact that everyone who's named Donald is nice. This was what I said this once the book came out, and they said, Rumsfeld? I said, well, okay. So he's a nice guy. He's trying to do a good job. But his arch enemy is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who just hates him for every reason because he won't, And he's in a position to thwart him by shooting down all his Supreme Court nominees. And he nominates to the court, legal giants, lions of the bar, people of the caliber of Dean William Traynor. And they get shot down for the most frivolous reasons by this guy. So the president is, after the second nominee is shot down, because he wrote an indifferent review of To Kill a Mockingbird when he was 12. And he says, I will not have, someone who would show up for the first Monday in October dressed in the robes of the Ku Klux Klan. So the president goes off to Camp David in a foul temper after this second nominee shot down. And he takes with him the first golden retriever, Dwight. And he and Dwight are in bed watching TV. They're channel surfing, trying to find the bowling channel, because this is what the president loves. He loves bowling. And he comes on this TV show. It's called Courtroom 6, and it's the Judge Judy, except she was a real judge, I guess like Judge Judy. And she's rather dishy. She's from Texas. She wears glasses. She looks sort of like a naughty librarian. And she wears a pistol under her robes. Very safe. But you'd look marvelous, And it's like, one of the top-rated shows in the country. People just love Judge Pepper Cartwright. So the president's watching this, fascinating. He didn't know the existence of this lady. He thinks, well, okay, you son of a gun. Let's see you shoot her down. So I give you, ladies and gentlemen, a novel that I handed in with the help of many people in this room in January. And the principal antagonists consist of a cosmetically enhanced chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee who's run for president multiple times and can't shut up, versus a glasses-wearing, gun-toting TV hottie. I take the occasion tonight to announce that I am retiring from satire. As Yogi Berra said when he was informed that a Jewish man had been elected mayor of Dublin, only in America. Thank you very much. Is there fine print in this?
No, it's real. Oh, thank you. Hey, Bill, what is that jacket? Welcome again, everyone. My name is Thane Rosenbaum. I'm the director of the Forum on Law, Culture, and Society. Oh, please, this was an initial announcement. Turn off your cell phones. Thanks for reminding me of that. So let me tell you how the rest of the night's going to go. We're going to talk for a little while. And then we'll take some questions from the audience, as we always do, since this is the Forum on Law, Culture, and Society. And then Chris will go outside and sign many, many books. In fact, we have paperbacks. We have Boomsday, which is actually one of my favorites.
Paperbacks?
Yeah, we have paperbacks, and of course, we have the hardcover of Supreme Court.
But they'll want to buy the hardcover because it's more expensive.
Yes, exactly, and the royalty rate is better. But we have all sorts of books that you can sign. So let me just start off by this intriguing last notion that you gave us, which is that Pepper Cartwright is in fact a Fordham. I just got lost? I'm gone?
Actually, it sounds a little better.
I think I'm better without it.
This way. Yeah,
Pepper Cartwright is a Fordham Law School graduate, and she's hot.
Hot.
She's smoking hot.
Smoking.
Now, aside from the fact that we took you to dinner, and you are a graduate of this law school.
As of tonight.
As of tonight, but you knew you were playing that, you were trying to game it from then. You were trying to play that card. You knew what you were going for. Were you, well, how should I say this? Will you just being cordial, placating us, or were you trying to make a statement about this law school? I mean, it is true, the women who go here are smoking hot. The Columbia people are not. That's where they go.
I contemplated Columbia, but I looked into it.
They're women. It's true.
There's a scientific study on this, and
it's like the Donald study.
Fordham women are, I think,
Unreal.
3.2 times hotter. So really, it was a no-brainer.
So you weren't trying, because it was just that, you weren't trying to make a statement about our graduates. I mean, you did honor us in an incredible way. You made her smoking hot and a TV celebrity and a Supreme Court justice. We've never done so well, by the way. In fiction, we rock.
I mean, I wanted to, be the one to put the first Fordham female graduate
we're grateful.
on the Supreme Court. And since life imitates art.
Yes. Hot girls.
You are.
Keep this in
now,
mind.
if the next nominee of the Supreme Court is a female Fordham graduate, do I get a real one of these?
No, but you will get a second tie.
Well, that's.
Second tie?
He's already got the second tie. Judge
he has the second
Preska,
tie?
do you think we can, as our front
Judge,
runner
really
for
got to
this?
help out. Yeah, good point. So, this idea about, also it is true, it's not just packing a pistol, but Pepper Cartwright also wears boots.
She wears boots.
And Sarah Palin wears boots. And there's something else that's really interesting about them. They're both perceived in the novel and in life as underqualified.
Well, I would put it to you that Pepper is being a graduate of Fordham.
I know.
Law
That's
School.
what I would say.
I mean, her credentials were never in doubt. She, when the president
But it's not her
offers
Fordham. It's that she's a TV judge, and we don't really think of them as a distinguished jurist in the same way.
No,
the Fordham thing wasn't the problem, is that she was a smoking hot TV judge
But
on
she's
Courtroom
also,
6.
she's demure. When the president offers her this job, she says, "You got to be kidding, I'm not qualified." Surely, I mean, that should be the response of anyone who's offered the Supreme Court. Governor Palin's reaction was apparently somewhat different. Saying,
This is
"Golly,
mine.
you betcha. Yeah, I'm totally qualified."
Although there is an element of all the Buckley novels, I think, in which ordinary people end up doing extraordinary things or saying extraordinary things and rising above their circumstance. We've seen this before. Maybe there's a statement being made here about Pepper, that in a world of these Byzantine bureaucracies, that you actually you actually believe that the Cassandras of our world, this is for those who've read Boomsday, which is really one of my favorite books.
Well, you were, I'm going to brag on you a little bit, because when we had that dinner at Gabriel's, and I was bouncing the plot off you, I said, well, okay, once I get her onto the court, what do I do with her then? And you gave me the key to it, which was that I think some judge that I spoke to, no, I think maybe you guys said, look.
It was me.
Oh, and
He giveth and taketh away. Some judge.
That the best quality any judge could have is good judgment.
Yeah.
I mean, that probably sounds like an idiotic statement, but don't agree. But that's at the nub of it. And so what happens? And she has great judgment. I mean, this TV show, she devises her judgments are very Solomonic and smart and witty and fun. And she dispenses actual justice. Then she gets on the court, and this is where you came in. And she tries to be someone that she's not. And the first case that comes before her is this case where a bank robber sues the gun manufacturer because his gun didn't go off when he tried to shoot the arresting deputy. And what do you know? It ends up before the Supreme Court. Who's to say that, that... Have you had any cases like that? Maybe not. But so she votes in favor of the bank robber because she's reading the law very narrowly. So she becomes sort of, she goes contra naturam. And anyway, in Act 3, Pepper gets her naturam back.
Right. I mean, we have with
That's
us our
neat.
distinguished professor, Ben Sapersky, who's here. And there's a great moment in the book that I know Ben was a part of, and I know that everyone who's in my classes will applaud this. The duty to rescue comes up. And she's on the Supreme Court of the United States.
Can I
And
read
Pepper,
a bit of
yes,
that?
we love
Just
this.
Because this passage was essentially written by your faculty. But Pepper arrives. She's single. Her producer husband divorces her when she goes off to the court. And she arrives in the court, and the Chief Justice is in sort of a bad way. Because he has recently cast the deciding vote in favor of legalizing gay marriage, whereupon his wife leaves him for a woman. So he's in sort of a bad way. He feels, frankly, a little humiliated, and he's nipping off the bottle. And anyway, one night, it apparently gets to him because Pepper goes into his office. She's a little worried about him. She goes into his office. She walked over, opened it, and saw an arresting sight. The Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court standing on the conference table, a rope around his neck, in the process of fastening the other end to an overhead light fixture. He turned and saw Pepper. The two Supreme Court justices stared at each other. Gosh, that's a good sentence, don't you think?
Excellent. Great image.
Great image.
Hell of an image.
Pepper said, "Am I interrupting?" His name is Chief Justice Hardweather. As it happens, Hardweather said, "Yes. I could come back, but thank you. If you'd please close the door behind you." Pepper said, "Can I ask you a question? If it's brief. Is this a cry for help, or are you actually fixing to hang yourself?" "Justice Cartwright," he said, "I don't mean to be rude, but could I have the room?" "Thank you. As you can see, I'm occupied." "I can see that," Pepper said. She turned and walked a few steps to the door, stopped. I don't want to intrude." "Then don't." "Well, the thing is, if I were to leave, I'd be guilty of aiding and abetting a felony. Suicide's a crime in D.C. I'm already paying one lawyer to handle my divorce and another to handle a breach of contract suit. I can't afford a third one, not on what this place pays." "No," the Chief Justice replied, "you're perfectly in the clear. You've committed no act in support of the deed." "Absent," said support, "you would be guilty only if there were a relational obligation." "Absent relational obligation." Is this how you guys talk?
This is how we talk. And this is what we contributed.
Yeah.
This
But
was-
it is the best part.
All I did was transcribe here. "Absent relational obligation, there being none here, you're quite blameless. I would remind you that there is no duty to rescue."
My class loves this part.
Ah,
But wait, no. What? Get ready.
It goes on.
It gets better.
"There's a moral duty, surely." Pepper
Hello?
said.
There's a moral duty.
Mr. Morality. Yeah. "We're not talking about moral duty, Justice. We're talking about law." "Right," Pepper said. "Sorry. It's well established under case law that, for instance, even if you were an expert swimmer, you would be blameless for failing to save a drowning person. While I am not aware of any case where the drowning person was attempting to sink, the larger principle developed in cases of accidental drownings is equally applicable. So you see, no problem. Good night, Justice." Pepper said thoughtfully, "I disagree." Chief Justice Hardweather said with annoyance, "On what grounds?" "I believe," Pepper said, "that because of our employment relationship, that is, as co-workers, if you will, that there is clear duty to care, and that I am thus obligated to, well, do something. No, 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 the Chief Justice shook his head. Duty to care extends only to employer-employee relationships. As Chief Justice, I am your superior, if you will, the hierarchically subordinate individual.
Ben wrote that. That wasn't me. That's Sapersky's words. I would never say that.
It's clearly, it's got his fingerprints all over it. The hierarchically subordinate individual is under no obligation to rescue the person in the hierarchically superior position. The court made it pellucidly clear in Zerbo versus Fantelli, I think I made that up, that it is only the hierarchically superior person who has the obligation to rescue the hierarchical inferior. So if you would shut the door behind you. There's a problem, Pepper said. For God's sakes, Justice, what problem? You're construing too narrowly. Well, it goes on, but no, thank you.
But here again, and I'm sorry, it's not like I'm having a plug for Sarah Palin. There is this notion that the ordinary person, yes, Fordham Law School graduate, but the person who we don't expect to teach us something actually does introduce something that we don't think a Supreme Court judge would do, which is think morally, even though we're taught to think only legally. And this is, to me, I would say this is a very consistent theme in some of your books. And so it makes me wonder about this whole notion of sacredness in Washington. You've skewered everybody. I mean, you were in Green Men, there's NASA and the space program, Florence of Arabia, what we liberate the women of the Middle East, Boomsday, it's the Social Security system. There's a blogger named Cassandra, interesting, who warns everybody about the impending financial crisis in our economy. Does that happen? And that the economy is going to, a crisis with the economy is going to collapse, and that what she wants to do is encourage baby boomers who are about to receive Social Security to kill themselves. Because that would be less of a drain on the economy.
It's a modest proposal.
God is My Broker is also appropriate, right? That's another great novel, because God is My Broker has a TV evangelist, becomes a TV evangelist who receives his stock tips from the Bible. And that also is related to, and so it does seem like there's an infinite number of ways to satirize government and the law. And so one question I think we're interested in is, what is this public role of the satirist? I mean, is there something serious within the funny? Are we learning something? It's hilarious, but obviously there's a deeper message.
Well, I'm the wrong one to ask that. I mean, I have been asked, do you consider yourself a social critic? That's a no-win. I'm an entertainer.
So it's more the satire than the politics.
Well, look, if there's a moral in there, but then you say, so are you a moralist? No. I tend to write about things that annoy me. There's lots of material out there, but thank you for smoking. You seen the movie? We've come full circle. Here we are, back right here,
right.
talking about
The premiere.
Someday we're going to be having the movie
Yes.
of Supreme Courtship, and we'll be back.
Well, we have to come back here.
But thank you for smoking, for instance, where the hero, if you will, if that's quite the right word, is a spokesman for the tobacco industry. And how do you get that idea? How does it? Well, one day I was watching, I think it was then called the McNeil-Lehrer Show. I still call it that. And there was they had on a scientist, someone with at least 2 PhDs after his name, who was there to present the latest evidence that smoking is bad for you. Hello. And they had on next to him, sitting right next to him, a lady, rather good-looking lady, and she was from something called the Tobacco Institute, whose existence I was unaware of. And her job, every time the PhD guy said something with the word enzyme in it, her job was to go, oh, please. You know, do you really take us for idiots? You know, and I became fascinated by someone who did that for a living. You know, who, you get up, you brush your teeth, you have some bran flakes, kiss the kids, and go sell death for a living. So I wrote a book about that. The Supreme Court idea really sort of came out of watching the nomination hearings, which, you know, we had the Bork hearings, and then oh God, save us all, the Clarence Thomas hearings. And now they were so awful, so contentious, and now they seem to have sort of morphed into a kind of a kabuki dance, where you have the nominees who are, you know, rough. Oh my dear God! What
Are you okay?
Roughly speaking, you know, the most, you know, brilliant people on the planet, pretending that they don't really have any opinions. They say, well, there are many ways of looking at that issue, Senator. And the senators, who are maybe not the most brilliant people on the planet, but you know, pretty smart. Joe Biden is not a dummy. Pretending that they don't believe in litmus tests. And they say, well, what do you think about Roe v. Wade? You know, that's not a litmus test. The only time you hear the phrase litmus test these days is in connection with Supreme Court nomination hearings. I don't even think they use the term in scientific labs anymore. You know, let's apply a litmus test. What's that? Oh, you know, it's the thing with the strip of paper. So I think that was sort of the impetus to do it.
But in being funny, it clearly Washington, bureaucracy, institutions, and the legal system. I was just reminded that even No Way to Treat a Lady is another. This is not our first law. Buckley does the legal system, right?
No,
this is No Way to Treat a Lady is the President of the United States is killed by his wife, the First Lady, because she caught him cheating. That never happened.
Well, actually,
They do catch them?
no, actually, she didn't kill him.
Oh, right, but she smashes
But
him
she
with
is, well, the president is a philandering good-for-nothing. Where did I get that idea? And he wakes up dead one morning
right.
with a dent in his head
Right.
that matches the, there's a silver
Seal,
spittoon
right.
from, that was made by Paul Revere, and they find, you know, the word Revere backwards in the stone. And
It's
this
the murder
is,
weapon.
Yeah. And the First Lady, who was in bed beside him, is indicted for murder. And she hires as her lawyer the top criminal lawyer in the country, whose name is Shameless Baylor. And he was her boyfriend in law school, and she dumped him for the president. So there's sort of a little complexity.
But it also picks
there.
up on tabloid trials, celebrity trials, right? And
Sure,
it picks up on
sure.
another thing that obviously.
By the way, I will say, you know, this financial, you give me the excuse to point this out. This financial meltdown that we're in, maybe it wasn't all for the bad, because it managed to make us forget an O.J. Simpson trial. Right?
It's at that level.
Right. No, but I mean, this is
think
good.
That's how, well.
This is good.
The question is it the spectacle of an economic collapse, or are we just freaking out? See, with O.J. Simpson, nobody's really invested. We're just tantalized by the amusement. Is anyone really amused by this? This has the same kind of feeling, except for our 401k plans.
Amused by the financial meltdown?
Yeah, there seems to be a reason for people to care about this one. Usually,
yeah.
Usually when people watch celebrity trials, we don't have a good reason to care. This at least we could justify,
No.
unless you don't have a 401k.
We're at a, I mean, you know, we're at a very peculiar point here. There's this sort of, it's the perfect storm, isn't it? You've got a president who no longer is relevant. No one's in charge. You know, the president doesn't matter. He could come out and say, "I'm going to declare war on Russia," and everyone would go, "Right." yeah. Sure. Send me a postcard. You've got the Congress has distinguished itself once again. You know, Bush's approval rating is now 22%. The Congress's approval rating is 8%. Think of that, 8%.
What's Paulson's?
Well, he's gone from being sort of King Henry
Right.
on the cover of Newsweek to, yeah. You know, I love, by the way, that the bill, you know, the bailout bill, that began as a 3-page sort of memo from Hank Paulson. It's like he's back on Wall Street. Okay, take a memo. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Blah blah blah. That has now become 483 pages. Have you seen? Yeah, it's now the size of Moby Dick. You know, but we seem to be in sort of a perfect storm period. You've got financial meltdown, a vacuum of leadership, and a presidential election. You know.
Let's take some questions from the audience.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
hear from some of you. Anything?
So while we're waiting.
Questions about bulk purchases?
Uh,
Go ahead.
yes?
Chris, in that passage you read, you used the word collusively.
I'm sorry?
In the passage you read, you used the word collusively.
Collusive.
And I was wondering, because I just read Jeff Toobin's book about the Supreme Court, and he said that was one of John Paul Stevens' favorite words. I was wondering if there was any connection between your reading some past decisions and your use of that word.
Well, it's hard to tell where Justice Stevens leaves off and I begin. We're often,
Except for the bow tie.
we're often confused.
And I think it's important to, right here at McNally to be clear that Buckley only lifts things from Traynor, Sapersky, and Rosenbaum.
That's right. That's right.
He doesn't lift from anybody.
No, but
else.
we're channeling. We're channeling.
It's been a favorite word of mine for, I first came across it in Latin class, 1,000 years ago. I just love it, and I'm glad you pointed it out.
Anyone else? Bill, you were going to say something?
So talk a little bit about how you came up with the other members of the Supreme Court.
Well,
good lead-in.
Writing a novel is, you got to come up with a name for the hero, and then a name for the hero's romantic interest, and then the bad guy, and then the foil, and a couple of ancillary characters. One of the challenges of writing a book about the Supreme Court is you automatically have 9 characters, and you have to come up with names for them, and this is the trick. Mm-hmm. So there's Chief Justice Declan Hardweather, and then there's a Justice Silvio Santamaria, who is a Jesuit, 250 pounds, slicked back black hair, former boxer, father of 13, advises the Vatican, and he plays the Advocatus Diaboli. So you want to be a saint, right? Yeah, well, I got a couple of questions for you. Does he remind you of
Now, who would that be?
Ginsburg.
Yes.
I got that fast. I got that first, too, right?
And there's quite my favorite justice is a very avuncular African-American justice named Crispus Gallivanter. And he becomes a kind of a mentor to Pepper. And anyway, he's very fond of him.
And I think one of the things I like about the novel is I think it's the first novel I've seen that, first of all, cites the Fordham Law Review.
Well, I may say your beloved dean was a bit shameless in his. I asked him for this would have been an email number 479, slugged help. I asked Bill to help me with yet another thing, and he said, I said, could you give me like maybe a citation to use? And he said, well, we could refer to an article in the Stanford Law Review by B. Traynor. So that's in there.
That's in there, yes, yes.
Shamelessly self-promotional.
That's actually in one of your interviews, you said that you thought about misspelling my name as a punishment for my effrontery.
But I couldn't quite bring myself to.
Yes, let's take one last question and we'll go sign some books. Yes.
As you went through the research process for this book, what things about the real Supreme Court impressed you and what things disappointed you?
Well, that's a good question. I went into Barnes & Noble early on. I said, do you have any books on the Supreme Court? They said, the entire 7th floor. And I was surprised by how many there are. And there was a book by is it Ed Lazarus, and every time I read it, he was a clerk. It's very very thick, and every time I mentioned his book to a couple of friends of mine in Washington who had clerked for Justice Potter Stewart, or sort of that era, and smoke began coming out their ears, saying, "Oh, disgraceful. Disgraceful." I said, well, it seemed a very reasonable book to me. They said, oh, clerks shouldn't be writing kiss and tell books. Well, this book read like a textbook. I mean, there was nothing. The most prurient thing in it was that at some very heated point, a couple of law clerks got into a shoving match, And that was about it. But apparently there was a time when clerks didn't, write clerk and tell books. But that America's pretty much, it was Bob Woodward's book, The Brethren. This was Woodward's first book after The Final Days and All the President's Men. And I know Bob a bit, and I remember talking to him, I said, what's your best-selling book? He said, The Brethren. I said, really? He said it had sold 640,000 copies in hardcover. That's, to those of you not in the business, that's a lot.
It's scary.
And good old Bob Woodward, he got sources. Everyone tells Bob Woodward everything. Bob Woodward could interview God and get and he would say to God what he says to everyone. He says, well, I've interviewed the devil, and here's what he said about you. So God would say, no, wait a minute.
I have something to add to that.
It wasn't 5 days, it was 7 days. But anyway, that was, and that Woodward's book sort of changed the ground rules, and now a lot of these books proliferated. That didn't really answer your question. I found it, in the main, pretty dry stuff. I'm very far from being an intellectual. And I found I reread, for instance, the transcript of Bush v. Gore, thinking, well, this will be like the fight scene in the movie Gladiator, Ted Olson versus David Boies. Wow, Clash of the Titans. It's pretty dull. It's pretty darn dull and very important. Nothing is more important. And that's why Justice Santa Maria, a.k.a.
Ginsburg,
is such an interesting guy because he writes apparently purposefully florid opinions of the kind that are typically described in the press as blistering or stinging, because he wants, he wants these to be studied. Are they not? I'm sure do you guys
They're
teach?
absolutely
Are they
studied.
teaching
Absolutely.
points? And
They're great to teach from.
they're written. He writes like Raphael Sabatini. You know? It's like,
Big brushstroke.
yeah.
So that Bush v. Gore was an excellent lead-in. Our Christopher Buckley night is going to come to an end. I have a few house cleaning discussions, and then we'll go off and have some refreshments outside and sign. Chris will graciously sign some books for us. Thank you for coming tonight. Our next event is the Fordham Law Film Festival, which is October 17th through the 23rd, and opening night is the HBO film Recount, which is a film about Bush v. Gore. And David Boies is one of our guests.
Oh, cool.
So in order to register for that night, www.fordhamfilmfestival.org. So that's coming up in a few weeks. We have fabulous films, really great guests. So please, if tonight was as stimulating and fun as you should have experienced, it'll be just as good next week. Well, not as good, because none of the people were actually Fordham grads. And then on November 19th, we have Sam Waterston, who will be here. We're calling it, you'll love this, ready? Atticus Finch in the Flesh. Nice title, Atticus Finch in the Flesh.
Very cool.
We'll have Sam Waterston here for yet another conversation. Yet again, register Fordham. That is on fordhamlawandculture.org. If you're not part of our mailing list, if you're not part of our extended family for the forum, please drop a business card outside. We want to send you all of our information about upcoming and future events. We always want to thank Helen Herman, who's the executive producer of the forum. Thank you. Remember that part of this Fordham Law School festive evening does not end even after you have a signed copy of Supreme Courtship. After an hour of refreshments, we'll be reconvening here for those of you who want to. Chris might even come back with us.
Something going on tonight?
Yes, in fact, there is. Pepper Cartwright will be debating Joe Biden. She's really smoking hot. Wait, you'll see. And we really have to thank our really good friend and Fordham alum, really lovely, sweet man, Christopher Buckley.